Good morning. Happy Friday. Today on the show with Paulina, we are going to talk about Tesla's surging stock price. Insane. What a big tech regulation might look like under a second Trump presidency. And why are utilities such an attractive sector going into 2025? Let's have a look at all this and more after the bell. So here we are on a Friday, getting ready for the weekend again. It's my favorite time in the morning with Paulina. Not only she's always smiling, she's so smart, she's always happy, but it also kind of kicks off the weekend. And I am a professional weekender. Just saying, really, really, really good at it. So keep that in mind. Okay. Having said that, ladies, let's get right to it. Tesla. So my favorite stock in the whole wide world is in fact Tesla. Pauline, I'm glad you threw it on the list today. I think the notes say it surged like 29-30% after the election, right? And for reasons that might not be totally expected. Let's dive into that one first.
Yeah, Tesla had an unexpected surge. It wasn't necessarily on fundamentals or earnings or anything like that, but it came from investors feeling optimistic about Tesla's future under a second Trump presidency. And that was mainly because we saw Elon Musk and all the support he threw behind Donald Trump this time around. And investors are thinking, with potential policy changes that could come under a second Trump term, that could play into Tesla's favor. So as a result, Tesla stock took off, like you said, around 29-30% after Trump won the 2024 presidential election. And it was an exciting time for Tesla, Elon Musk, the EV industry, Tesla investors. And the thought is, this relationship between Musk and Trump, it could lead to some favorable treatment in this new administration.
I get it. So you scratch my back, I scratch yours. That kind of deal.
Potentially, yeah.
Potentially. Okay. It seems a little odd to me. I mean, this whole synergy, I suppose, because I don't think Trump's a big EV guy necessarily. I think he's more of a Detroit guy and burn that gas baby kind of thing. So interesting relative to the EV world that this would have happened.
Yeah, he could potentially, to your point, cut back on EV subsidies because he is such a strong supporter of the Detroit giants. And this could seem an issue for the electric vehicle industry, but inadvertently, it could still play into Tesla's favor because Tesla is already such a big player in the EV space. And this means that it would have less competition from other companies that are trying to ramp up their EV business. And then in addition to that, we have a Trump's America First policy where he's really hell-bent on imposing high tariffs on imports from China. So if China EVs try to come into the US, they're going to be hit with heavy tariffs. And again, that's going to play into Tesla's favor as well.
Got it. And that makes sense, I think. Mal, do you have a Tesla?
I do have a Tesla and I adore it. I adore her. If I talk too many conspiracy theories or CT scans, I know it'll drive me off a cliff. I do worry about that. But
I love my Tesla too. I do. I think there's so much more going on with Elon though in general. They're talking about his having a position in the presidency or in the cabinet, whatever you call it.
He's now the CTO of the U.S.
Yeah, the CTO of the U.S. Hilarious. I just think everything he touches turns kind of a little bit to gold, right? The SpaceX, everything. It's just like nuts. So I'm not surprised. I got to be honest. I don't know how you guys feel.
That's probably in the literal sense. He's moving to, I think he was quoted as X.com potentially being half of, the financial activity in the world. Mm-hmm. So we'll have to watch that. But I think it's really interesting, the tariffs issue. What do you think about that? Just quickly on a side note, you know, we used to just run on tariffs. Like the country was based off of taxation without representation.
Mm-hmm.
So IRS kind of is a new gig in a one generation thing. So if he's looking to cut taxes and bring in tariffs, and then also with Elon there, we'll have to see that EV market in China kind of get stunted maybe, or we earn a lot from those imports.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you guys think about that?
You want to go first, Paulina? Go ahead.
Yeah. So when it comes to tariffs on Chinese imports, this was something that Wall Street has been talking about for weeks leading up to the election, how it could impact companies. And there are some sectors, particularly consumer-facing companies, that would be that there could be some headwinds there as it relates to, because a majority of our goods come from China, and that's where all the imports come from. So the proposed tariffs, it's roughly around 10 to 20% that could make up that could be imposed on Chinese EVs. That would make them obviously more expensive in the US. As a result, I think that would give Tesla a competitive edge, because it would just make their EVs cheaper relative to these Chinese EVs. So I think it would be a net positive for Tesla.
So my fear is that if we raise these tariffs on the goods that we import and that our U.S. consumer uses, that they're not going to absorb these tariffs, they being the producers of this stuff, the Chinese, and just say, oh, we'll just eat this one. They're going to pass it along in higher prices, right, to the consumer and cover that 10 or 20% or whatever it's going to be. I'm not saying it's going to happen necessarily. I think that could happen, though. You guys feel differently about that? I mean, isn't that most likely the possibility?
Do you mind
I'm not negative tariffs either. I want everything to be produced in America too, if we can.
Yeah.
I love that, but it's probably not realistic for everything. So therefore, is this?
Well, look, have you guys seen this rumors where war nowadays it's quiet. So we don't have a bunch of guys in red suits with flags and drums coming through. It's sort of the undercurrent. So we saw China go through Canada with their steel, and then we'd buy steel from Canada, and it was it wasn't as strong. It was unsafe, and so we saw that happen. Now we're seeing companies like BED, who are backed by the CCP, coming in with potential infrastructure into the United States. So, and then what we also are seeing now, that they're buying up farmland. And by the way, it has nothing to do with the Chinese people. I love the Chinese people. It's just like how are geopolitics positioning itself currently. So now we're seeing farmland purchased around some of our military strong points. So white men, you'll see, everywhere that there's these strong military bases, you have Chinese picking land up right around there. So you have to be really careful on zooming out and not just looking at the EV car industry itself, but also United States and being protected and operating through that. So I do think that as a benefit, just as a general point.
Yeah. Well, he's the pros for the tariffs are he's trying to encourage domestic production and jobs and goods, right? We get that. Reducing the trade deficit, probably this tariff helps for that. It obviously protects domestic industries, right? Those kind of things are good. I just worry about the negatives that could be kind of inflationary, I suppose. So like we talked about earlier, higher consumer prices.
That transition,
it certainly could disrupt global supply chains potentially, right? So I don't know. I think it's a mixed bag. I know what he's trying to do. I'm in agreement generally with the concept. I just wonder if this is the best way. So.
Right. And I think, I was just going to suggest on that clip, on the Revenue Act of 1862, when the IRS came into play, That was great. But in the 50s, it was completely revamped to our current IRS system. And so, I love that scene where all the binders come out because it's just as complicated. So I do think we need a reduction and some simplifying of our internal revenue system, internal revenue services. So I do think that tariffs coming in to allow us to fund a transfer of income for the United States from an external kind of, think of it at ketosis. So out of some sugary, terrible thing into something healthier, which is, I do think I would take the inflationary hit in the meantime to see that happen. That's what I would say.
Okay.
Yeah. The last thing.
What were you saying, Paulina? Sorry.
Yeah. The last thing I'll add there is obviously when it comes to the economy, things have a lagging effect. So even when the Federal Reserve lowers interest rates, it takes about 6 to 9 months in order for us to see the effects of that. So even if my assumption here, I'm not an economist, but even if we do have inflationary effects in the short term, I think that, that will create more revenue for the US, and hopefully that is going to be allocated appropriately. And then that'll create more opportunities for companies to build and manufacture here, which over time is going to make our goods and services cheaper. So I hope that's the idea here. So, and then obviously, that would bode well for a variety of industries, including the EV industry.
Yeah.
And can I just CT scan it for just a second? Can I throw something in here?
Yeah. What are you going to throw in, Crazy Molly?
You do hear about like audit the Fed, right? So we haven't had a really nice audit of the Fed in a long time. And so have you seen that video going around with Jerome Powell being asked, if Trump asked him to step down, would he stay? He's like, I'm staying. He can't do that. So it'll be really.
I don't understand that. Well, how is that possible?
Yeah. So when you look into the structure, and great books are Lord of Easy Money and Creature of Jekyll Island, and you really start to understand what is the Federal Reserve System. They're currently, and I want to see if that's changed, but it was the reserve itself was officially dropped. We officially went on a fiat currency with during Nixon, when we had previously agreed in Bretton Woods to make sure the dollar was gold backed, and then everything would be tagged to the dollar. So when you see the Federal Reserve is actually not federal in a sense, then and you see if you look at the resumes of the guys on the board, not everyone's in play, but when you read Lord of Easy Money, you'll see it's a really great dissection of how it functions. And I think that one quote, the reason why it's going around is because that's the reaction. How is that even possible? And so now you'll have this kind of exposure of the functionality and the interaction between the governments. And here's the great thing. So RFK is now professing that they're going to put everything on blockchain, which means, forget audit the Fed. We're going to have all of our eyes on every kind of point, trying to figure out why 30,000 was spent on a, toilet seat. Yeah, that's what RFK said. Which I love that analysis. But yeah, so we have to, really embrace. There's going to be a lot of change coming, and I think it's going to be healthy. And if you were to look at the United States as a patient, as a whole, what were the repercussions of this recent election? Was it good for the entire body, or was it bad for the entire body? And I think we can see that, between the markets and some of the geopolitics movement that we're seeing, it's possibly good. We're kind of starting to avoid a World War III. So
I hope you're right.
Yeah.
All right, let's move to the next topic and get some more stuff on it. Ready? Big tech regulation. Well, going hand in hand. We know Trump is very anti-regulation, so I'm assuming that's where we're going with this topic. What are your thoughts here, Paulina?
Yeah, so obviously under the Biden administration, him and his administration ruled with a heavy hand on big tech. We saw the FTC chair, Lina Khan, she went after Microsoft, Amazon, Meta, and the DOJ under Jonathan Cantor has been going after Alphabet with a bunch of antitrust cases. So it's likely that these two regulatory heads are going to be removed. And Trump is likely to be a bit more selective when it comes to antitrust cases. He might scrap some of what the Biden administration had started with big tech. So we might not expect heavy crackdowns like we've seen recently. I will say, though, the Vice President-elect J.D. Vance, he has been vocal in his criticism of big tech, and in some cases, he agreed with the regulation cases that Lena Khan was in favor of. So it's going to be interesting to see how their voices potentially clash, or have more constructive conversations around that. And I think another important piece here is China. So Trump's team, as I mentioned, he has America First policies. So he wants to prioritize American tech firms in order to beat out China competition, especially as it relates to the race for artificial intelligence. And we've been talking about for years now how Meta, Amazon, Alphabet, Microsoft, they have been spending billions of dollars to innovate AI. So as it relates to competition and national security, I think that we might see antitrust kind of have a more soft hand with the big tech companies.
Yeah, I agree with that too. I think that's fairly accurate.
Okay, so we see Berkshire unloading Apple stock. And why is that after the election? So
I think we talked about this when you might have missed an episode.
Because we did.
Mr. Buffett, Warren, is sitting on a $325 billion of cash, and part of that was the sale of Apple. And who knows what he was doing. I thought, maybe he thought something bad was going to happen because of the election. He was going to load up, but obviously that's not the case.
Well, here's my theory. So Elon is very, very vocal about the new partnership between OpenAI integrating ChatGPT into Apple products. So he's even voiced to make sure that none of those products are anywhere near his offices, because he just doesn't trust Sam Altman. So he's been vocal about, Sam Altman has been quoted that AGI is here next year. So AGI is sort of superior to human intelligence, in which case, is that dangerous for a humanist? So if now he has a strong hold in government policy, he's the CTO of the US, and that partnership is there, is Berkshire anticipating some sort of regulatory interface in AI? Because he's also, Elon is very vocal about regulating AI at this point, and that it's more dangerous than nuclear weapons. So I think that's why we're seeing that initial shorting of Apple, and I can't say I disagree with Elon on this. Now, I am pro AI. I'm optimistic on AI. I really love it. I can't live without it. And I think Jeff Bezos puts it perfectly, where think of it as a telescope to see farther and to see new things, and it will help us in medicine and exploration of space. You name it, it'll help us with everything. So
I think so. I think it's good. I think it's fantastic. So last thing on this topic, though, Paulina, is Trump going to kind of push away from the breaking up the monopoly concept, that some of the previous administration was talking about?
Yeah, so there's been some questions around whether he is in favor of breaking up Alphabet into separate entities. Yeah. I think it's unlikely that he's going to push for breaking up these big tech companies, because he did comment on how that would, not be in favor of U.S. tech leadership. So I think that he won't be in favor of that regulatory scrutiny, which, in Alphabet's case, the DOJ, one of the remedies for the antitrust cases was to break Apple up and for it to separate different parts of the business or divest different parts of the business. So it doesn't seem like that remedy might actually happen.
Okay, makes sense. Cool. All right, moving along. Utilities as a sector in 2025. Are you a bear or a bull, Paulina?
Oh, a bull. Absolutely.
Raging bull. Okay.
I agree.
I got to be honest. How did utilities do in 2024? I don't follow sectors. My bad.
So far this year, utilities has been one of the top three, I think,
Okay.
performing. Tech has been first. I think financials is second, and utilities is up there in the mid 20s, I believe.
Okay.
So it's been a strong performer. In the beginning of the year, it was more defensive because investors thought that the economy is slowing down and utilities are a defensive sector, so they were piling into that. However, with the AI build out happening and the hyperscalers, like we mentioned them before, Amazon, Microsoft, and the like, they're building out data centers that require AI hardware and infrastructure to process these AI training models and so forth. And all of this is putting immense pressure on our electric grid, which is very, very old. It was built in the 60s and 70s, and the transmission and distribution networks weren't made for the level of power that's required that the data centers need. So a lot of regulatory bodies in this electric power space, they're ramping up their spend, their capital expenditures out until 2030.
Wow.
So a lot of this money is going to go towards electric power solutions and companies that build the grid, some of which I'm actually writing a story about this, which is why I know some of these companies. The first that comes to mind is Quanta Services. Quanta, yeah, PWR is the ticker. These are more like mid-cap companies. They're big companies, but they're more mid-cap, aren't large cap. So Quanta is one. Another one is Moztec. I believe the CEO. It's owned by a Mexican family. Moss is the last name, and they've been in the business for a very long time, focusing on oil and gas and telecom projects. But more recently, they've been working on electric transmission and distribution projects. And that stock is up like 91%, I think, this year. And analysts are expecting for it to have a really good 2025. And then another one is MYR Group. They're exposed to the same tailwind. So those are the three companies. And there are so many opportunities in this utility CapEx theme. There's not only these specialty contractors, those three that I just named, but there's also other companies that operate the grid. Like think of American Electric Tower or Sempra or Excel. So there are multiple ways to play this.
Got it. Makes sense. I mean, you kind of think of utilities as being the defensive sector, on the planet. And now all of a sudden, this defensive sector could be the big growth sector going forward with this whole AI need and power in the new grids, right? Yeah.
AI is creating a huge opportunity here. And a lot of these companies have outperformed this year, but I think it's a multi-year growth opportunity. That's what I'm hearing from analysts, because this investment is going to go until the end of the decade and even beyond that. So different states, they're allocating a lot of money towards this because the electric grid, the transmission and distribution networks, they're just so old. And on top of that, you have extreme weathers like hurricanes that are putting immense pressure on it, population growth in addition to that. So the grid is just not able to handle all of the capacity, basically, that we need to operate in the modern times.
Yeah. Well, you said that our current grids were built in the 60s and 70s. Is that?
Yeah,
I was
60 years old.
vouch for that in Los Angeles. Grid goes down all of the time.
Your internet sucks, Molly. Let's call it.
I know. I have Starlink. It arrived.
Oh.
So I think it's really important to look at energy sector too against bonds. I think when the yields dropped and people were losing money in their savings, their go-tos, you can't live without energy. The other point though is what happens when free energy comes in. And
what do you mean by that, free energy?
So there is technology out there that could possibly produce free energy. So for example, one is 0 point energy. And so of these, I always talk about quantum computation, no one's really keeping their eye on it. Everyone's talking about artificial intelligence, but when that becomes scalable and usable, and we can really dial that in, which is happening, those computations to bring and to discover for new discoveries as far as free energy will affect the energy sector. So we do have to look far out to today, if you're especially a long-term investor, against those two components.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. That makes sense. I always thought like utilities though were kind of
right. They're like bonds, like so boring.
Utility stock, it was probably like a 10 or something like that. Like what a sleeper. My God. Now it's hardly like that, right? They're exciting.
And like you said, I mean, with AI, coming onto the power grid, and people talking about nuclear though, as far as powering AI. Mm-hmm. And there's that sounds scary, but would AI help manage nuclear better? And is nuclear, are there benefits? There could be benefits. So we'll have to see how that plays out. But
yeah. All right. Gotta run. I see the time and I'm over the time. I'm just ding, ding, ding. Sorry. Paulina, thanks as always.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah, it was awesome. I love this stuff. I need to get, did you get the ticker, Molly? Power. PWR.
Is that for which?
That was the first one. Yeah, the first one.
So PWR is Quanta Services.
Right.
The other one is MasTech. I think it's MAS. And then MYR Group was MYRG.
Sure.
And so those are the three.
Okay.
If we want to talk about other areas of utilities, I can bring that next week.
Yeah, let's do that. One thing I'd love to do, and I forgot to tell you this last time, Paulina, because when I said goodbye, you always go. So I didn't get the chance to tell you. Is that when you send over our topics, what I think we could do, if I can get to it, is maybe I'll come up with a trade in one of the stocks that fits the bill. Like obviously we talked about Tesla today. We can go bearish or bullish and put a little option spread on it. I think some of the listeners would like that. So we'll think about that maybe.
So if you do like the sound of that, throw it in the comments with a thumbs up, and Lex will be hard at work.
I will come up with something. We may not like it, just like some of my food on Sunday night, but we keep trying, right?
I did have a position on MicroStrategy, which did really well. I'm very excited about it.
Yeah, awesome.
All right. Good. All right, guys. Well, good to see you as always. Happy Friday. Go Eagles, because I'm not a Bears fan anymore because they suck so bad. I can't stand watching them. Their coaching stinks. It's the worst, and it makes me angry. So I'm an Eagles fan for now.
Yay.
All right, Paulina. You guys have a great weekend, and we'll see you next week.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, guys.
You know how the financial world goes. Here comes the buzzkill. Please make sure to take some time to read this boring disclaimer. We will owe you one.